Trump announced that J.D. Vance, and here, seen here with Dr. Oz, is going to be the fraud czar. And since he's got a fake name and allegedly a beard and a bunch of other BS in his background, maybe he's the perfect guy, set a thief to catch a thief. But this is his announcement of how they're going to do this process. And I don't have the nut warning thing like I would have for Trump for the amount of charisma, the Riz that is just going to blow off the screen, kapow, right out of the face of JD Vance. You're like, Hal, I don't know that I can take this much excitement, before the sun goes down. But here we go.
So let me say a couple things about what we're announcing today, and then I'm going
to at CMS.
These are. Why is he jumping ahead? I think he hands. How long is this thing? Does he answer questions? They go back and forth. Okay, they go back. Okay. They reset it. That's why they reset the recording since I stacked it. So, give me 1 second. Bink.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So let me say a couple things about what we're announcing today, and then I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Oz, and then we are going to take a few questions. So as a lot of you know, there are way too many Americans who are being defrauded by very bad actors in our society.
Well, technically speaking, when you're talking about federal tax dollars, every American is being defrauded if there's fraud going on. The question is, does it elevate to the point of being a crisis or specific to this require this kind of breakout, or indeed is the state handling it by arresting the people involved, period, which they have already.
People who take the goodwill and the trust of the American taxpayer and they decide to use it against us.
Oh, you mean like Trump? Sure.
They decide to make themselves rich instead of allowing these programs that are set up to make it easier for people to take care of their families, to make it easier for autistic kids to get the after-school services they need, to make it easier for people to get the health care that they need. And
well, especially in areas where the autistic kids that were allegedly getting the funds don't exist. So if anything, this is an action of overfunding around the pandemic, but we'll get there later.
We're going to start very aggressively in the administration.
I don't remember who was president when the pandemic started and signed most of the bills that allowed for the first payments to go out and support. Does anybody? Was did that person care about how the stock market would work out that year, or did you just don't give a shit? We got to work on what's best for the American people. I can't remember.
Down on the people and the organizations that are defrauding Americans. So we're announcing today that we have decided to temporarily halt certain amounts of Medicaid funding that are going to the state of Minnesota in order to ensure that the state of Minnesota,
which by the way is future money that they will allocate, because the money, I want to say for the first fiscal half of the year has already been put in place. This is a bluff. By the way, this is, obviously outrageous and grotesque, but it's also a bluff. It's not going to amount to a hill of beans, just for the record.
But it takes its obligations seriously to be good stewards of the American people's tax money. Now, what is this going to mean? What this means is that, first of all, the providers on the ground in Minnesota have actually already been paid. The state has paid those providers the money. What we're doing is we are stopping the federal payments that will go to the state government until the state government takes its obligations seriously.
Which, sorry, what's the metric for that?
Stop the fraud that's being perpetrated against the American taxpayer. There are a few different ways that we're doing that. There are a few different affirmative actions that we're taking today.
Wait, you're using affirmative action?
Dr. Oz is going to talk about those.
Dr. Oz is going to talk about affirmative action?
Let me talk a little bit.
After he makes a hangina in front of his crotch, which is, I think, either a sign that you're part of the Bohemian Grove or you're just awkward.
Spirit of this and why we're doing it. So number one of the examples of fraud that we've seen in Minnesota that we verified that is just awful is that
sorry, whether it's fraud or not is the part you verify. The awful part, I guess, is a matter of opinion.
Program that existed to ensure that autistic children had access to some after-school services has made a number of people rich, not by providing services to needy children, but by allowing fraudsters to take money that ought by right go to American citizens and to American families, and to set up sham businesses, set up sham clients, set up people who are not even autistic but claim to be autistic in order that they benefit from the money that's out there. Now, what does that mean? Number one, it means that a lot of people are getting rich off the generosity of American taxpayers, but more fundamentally and more importantly than that, it means that there are kids in Minnesota who deserve these services, who need these services, and they're not going to those kids, they're going to fraudsters in Minneapolis.
Yeah, not anymore. And asshole, congratulations. You're already good at your job. You're so effective that multiple individuals have been charged, and at least one has pled guilty in connection with a large-scale autism fraud scheme in Minnesota. The scheme allegedly defrauded a publicly funded state program of millions of dollars. The program targeted early intensive developmental and behavioral intervention. It was the EIDBI program, a Minnesota healthcare program for people under the age of 21 with autism spectrum disorder. Primary defendants, Asha Farhan Hassan, owner of Smart Therapy LLC, was the first person charged in the scheme, has pled guilty to one count of wire fraud. She admitted her role in a $14 million Medicaid scheme and is also separated in the separate Feeding Our Future fraud. She's required to pay nearly $16 million in restitution. Abdinajib Hassan Yusuf, president and CEO of Star Autism Center LLC, has been charged with one count of wire fraud in connection with obtaining more than $6 million in those funds. The scheme mechanics. The fraud involves submitting millions of dollars worth of false claims for Medicare reimbursement, employing unqualified individuals, often young relatives with no formal training, as behavioral technicians, recruiting children into the centers, in some cases working to get children to falsely qualify for autism services, paying cash kickbacks to parents who enroll their children with higher payments for higher authorized services, billing for services that were never provided and fraudulently inflated, as all Medicare and Medicaid fraud happens. All healthcare fraud, insurance fraud happens this way. Connections to other scandals. Federal prosecutors have have indicated that the autism fraud is linked to another widespread fraud scheme, schemes in Minnesota, including the massive Feeding Our Future child nutrition program fraud and housing stabilization services fraud. The investigators are ongoing by multiple federal agencies, including FBI, IRS, and Department of Health and Human Services, and Office of the Inspector General. The total potential fraud across various Minnesota Medicaid programs is estimated to be billions of dollars. Trump administration announced a temporary halt to some. That's what happened today. Okay, 6 additional defendants. We're charging 6 additional defendants. Been charged federally with participating in schemes defrauding the government. The state brought charges first, and then the feds picked them up. This would be the Hassan Yusuf, the 27-year-old, who's charged with by federal information on one count of wire fraud. This is the primary thing, and then they'll go after them. The point is that the people involved in this have been arrested because it's a crime. It's always been a crime. It will continue to be a crime no matter who does it. And like this billions of dollars versus $17 billion, $21 billion, it might be as much as the entire budget of Medicaid in Minnesota is what they're saying. Is just a farce. The point is, it's already happening. Like and if they're going to look more into it, the investigations are already happening. What they're going to do is put him in a position to take claim for, or to claim that, that this new fraud czar, whatever board that they'll put together, gets credit for the investigations that are current and ongoing that have already been happening.
Unacceptable, and that's the sort of thing that we're cutting off with this action today. Let me make one final point about the spirit of this. You know, one of the things I love about our country is that we're a generous country. We're a generous people. We take care of our fellow citizens who can't afford medical care because they're down on their luck. We take care of...
Yeah, not if Mike Lee had his choice, and certainly not Republicans. The only reason you're doing that is because red states rely on it more than blue states do.
Who can't...
Per capita, whatever per capita means.
To put food on the table, even though they work hard and play by the rules. We recognize that we're all in this together, and part of the reason why we have Medicaid, or part of the reason why we have food stamps, part of the reason why we have these programs, is we want to make sure that kids who grew up in families not all that different from the family that I grew up in, that they have access.
Yeah, dude, you're not even using your real name.
basic necessities.
I'm going to assume your backstory is bullshit until such time as that other proof is given. If anybody should be dogged around by a birth certificate and backstory claim, it's this dude.
Food, medical care, after school services when their family needs them, but they're unable to pay. What's happening in Minneapolis, in California, in a number of states all across our country
Mostly red.
is that the generosity and the good hearts of our fellow Americans are being taken advantage of. We're taking that social contract that says that our American citizens, we take care of one another, and we're allowing a few
They're like, there's a note in the teleprompter that says, try to have emotion about this. Make gesture of hand.
bad actors to get rich off that generosity of spirit instead of providing the services to the kids who need it. This is disgraceful.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite. It's that we put up with some of the bad actors because the kids who need it are so important, and it's so easy for people to get disenfranchised and give up on the services that should be available to them if the reins are too tight. So they loosen them up, and there's a give and take between the loosening and the tightening all the time. And anytime there's a gap between those two things, bad actors can slip in and steal money from this. And the question is, what's it like in our legal system? It's better that 12 guilty people go free than one innocent man go to jail. The same thing is sort of true about like it's better to have a certain amount of fraud than have one kid go hungry.
It has happened for too long. Far too many people have gotten rich by taking what is the best of the American spirit and getting rich off of it instead of providing services to kids.
But enough about Eric Trump.
That is stopping today. We're taking a whole of government approach in the Trump administration to take this fraud seriously. What Mehmet Oz and his team at CMS have done is really remarkable, and it's just the first step of our efforts. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Mehmet to say a few words about what he's doing, what his team has uncovered, and what they're accomplishing with this new action. Dr. Oz.
Wait, so I'm going to slap the table. I'm going to slap you back so I can seem like the boss in this situation instead of both of us have been sent to another room to do a press conference so that Trump can look like he's doing something while he naps or gets his IV.
President, I appreciate the leadership on this.
There hasn't been any yet, stupid. He just got appointed to this.
That his commitment, the Vice President's commitment to rooting out this fraud is going to make a massive difference in preserving and protecting our nation's public health programs. It's going to
Sorry, in the Trump administration, until the vice president gave a shit, this wasn't a priority.
Patience. I want to thank President Trump for pushing all of us to make sure we protect our most vulnerable Americans, the ones that JD mentioned, the ones he grew up with, the ones all of us know in our lives. It also protects taxpayers from attacks on our healthcare system. Secretary Kennedy has spearheaded these efforts, and thanks to his leadership, I'm proud to announce
he'd be here, but he's snorting coke off of a toilet seat right now.
The largest fraud initiative, anti-fraud effort of its kind in CMS history. Now, why is this action necessary?
Because Pam Bondi's too busy blacking out Trump's name in the Epstein files to do this job, so you're having to move it over to your organization and set up an entirely different law enforcement adjunct that will carry this out.
In the State of the Union address, the President spoke about the affordability issues that we have improved dramatically in this administration.
Nope.
Put some numbers on.
No, you haven't.
The average family puts about $27,000 in the health care a year. They only pay $7,000 themselves, which is a lot, but there's an extra $20,000 invested for them. This is not a reasonable amount of money to spend. We have got to bend that curve downwards. It's unpredictable as well when you have to make these expenses, and the fraud that we're experiencing in America is making this already dangerous problem much worse. So we're going to fix these issues. The President.
Sorry. So his argument is that the average American American family puts $27,000 towards health care, and I'm assuming this is from everything from skin knees to cancer. Obviously it's an uneven distribution, and that the average American has about on average, who has insurance or is poor enough to get Medicaid or Medicare to pick up the tab, or age-wise perhaps has Medicare Part D or something like that picks up some of the slack. That out of pocket they got about $7,000. And there's about 20,000 in there, and that 20,000 is the government's part. And what they want to do is either cut you off from that as a way of lowering that cost, or bully it out of existence by claiming fraud, I suppose, and therefore lower, fix the hole in the deficit that Trump is blowing with his tax cuts by limiting people's health care, by lowering what the government spends in that direction, or insurance, I guess, does, like private insurance somehow, which is part of his giveaway to the pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare companies.
Last night,
the insurance.
Spoke about the need for price transparency. That's going to help by making people more aware of what they're paying. It's
Gonna? I thought that was already in place last term.
going to help us at CMS figure out what you should be paying and identifying.
Sorry, you don't know right now? Hold on. Whoops. Yeah, this is the hospital price transparency rule from 2021. Is the transparency and coverage rule in 2022. I don't remember who was president in those years. Anybody remember? And the requirements content information must include gross charges, payer specific negotiated rates, and discounted cash prices. The CMS actually is in charge of the compliance on those rules. Let's see. And then I guess I don't know. Like he just layered over top of it. Like in 2025, they put in this thing in, I guess, in the big BS bill. Let's see, health affairs. Yeah, like it came into yeah, here price transparency. This is the National Library of Medicine. Okay, that's their abstract on it. Yeah, so they passed in 20 and 21, or sorry, 21 and 22. What do you mean gonna?
To that note, the president announced last night that he's.
By the way, in our current family situation where we're having to deal with a lot of medical billing, they break it down. They go through the whole fucking thing, like every time. Like, here's the list. Here's what everything's going to cost. These are your options for paying for it versus, what your insurance will or won't cover. We'll ask insurance to cover. If they don't, then there are these other options, especially in bigger treatments. I guess what they're talking about is if you go in for a broken arm, you get a price list of, just tape it up is what this is sort of like. You can choose actually get it treated, or you can choose from our gangrene, leeching, and frontier medicine list.
Our vice president to lead the war on healthcare fraud, a wise choice. Your passion for this will make a huge difference. This is not about the money by itself. This is about people's lives and our culture, our shared values that have allowed these beautiful programs, Medicare and Medicaid, to survive brilliantly for 60 years.
Brilliantly? Mike Lee is literally trying to get Trump to scuttle them.
We believe, listen carefully, we are spending $300 billion a year in healthcare in this country for fraudulent, abusive, or wasteful purposes.
Okay, those are three different first of all, what the fuck does abusive mean? Sorry. Are people writing off their trip to the dominatrix? I could pay a shrink and tell her my problems, or I could hire a woman to kick me in the balls and I feel just as good after the session. Because once the pain stops, it's amazing how much less stress I feel. Abusive? That sounds corporate. That doesn't sound like, or that sounds like people that you don't think they deserve the treatments that they're getting. So why are you back here again? Why are you taking advantage of the system? Maybe that's what they mean. And fraud's a very easy one. You don't need the care, and you're billing for it anyways. You're faking being ill. You're faking having patients, that kind of stuff. What were the third?
A year in healthcare in this country for fraudulent, abusive, or wasteful purposes.
Okay, and then wasteful is bureaucratic. Don't even get me started. You know the deep state you bitch about all the fucking time? Okay, that's who handles the wasteful part. That's what bureaucrats famously have always done. We don't have the budget for that. We're not going to do it. Tightening that up makes it harder for people to get healthcare that when they need it the most at the worst time. But it's a trade-off. You can tighten those reins, but you're going to limit who gets care. And that's the difficulty of governance. That's why it takes competent people to run it, because you want to trust the judgment of the people in charge instead of this waste, fraud, and abuse is just a fucking blather term. It's like dealing with homelessness by talking about homeless people like they're a fucking tribe, when there are varying degrees of homelessness and you can't treat them with broad brush. You can't treat the mentally ill the same way you would treat somebody who fell through the cracks because a factory closed down and they're on the street because they lost their job through no fault of their own. Those are both homeless people, but you can't solve them the same way. And you can't. It's saying waste, fraud, and abuse is like this fucking like this. It's like they're painting over the problem. It's like when you're moving out of an apartment and you have holes in the walls from poster tacks and you fill them with toothpaste. That's what everybody tells you to do. Like, if you can't, I don't know why you can't afford spackle, but one of the ways you can cover it is put toothpaste in there, and by the time they realize the hole's still there, you're gone. That kind of stupid trick. That's what this is.
$300 billion. Let's put that in perspective.
Okay, I'll put that in perspective. We have a $27 trillion yearly economy. Let me say that again. The United States has a $27 trillion economy. $5 trillion worth of transactions go through Goldman Sachs servers every night.
If we could reduce fraud by 5%, which is at $300 billion, we would take the trust fund that's going to take care of all of us as we get older, and we would allow it not to expire in 5 to 6 years. We would double its life expectancy.
Right. And by the way, your assumption about the $300 billion in fraud, waste, and abuse, by the way, and your default for the word fraud to cover all of it gives it this idea if we just arrest 5% of the bad guys, we'll extend the like how long the Social Security safety net extend. Like, what you need to do is show me that the $300 billion number actually exists and isn't just you not believing that certain people deserve the care they're getting. That you want to kick people. It's like Trump, like, we got people off food stamps. You kicked people off food stamps. That's not the same thing as getting them off food stamps. Getting them off food stamp means they've got a job and a reasonable rent scheme and utilities covered and enough money left over to have a fucking life, so they're above the poverty line by a measurable distance and they're not in danger of always falling back. That would get people off of food stamps. Kicking them off is different.
That's massively important if you're going to trust.
Also, by the way, his number of kicking people off of food stamps has a lot more to do with like just sunsetting programs that started during COVID that naturally had a sunset anyways, and those people weren't collecting those food stamps. They had stopped a long time ago because it was just about COVID. So the numbers are false regardless because they sunsetted this year, late last year.
To be there for you. You deserve that social safety net. It's there. It's created. We're not going to let fraudsters steal it from you. The Stellar CNS team, I want to call them out. Kim Brandt, who's videoing me over there. Dan Brillman, Capri Snap, Steph Carlton have worked tirelessly to put this together. They've been...
Sorry, your staff that's putting this whole thing together is also running the camera for this event. So this is all just media is what you're saying. This is... like, they're not, you didn't put together an investigative body, you put together a sales force.
Criminals all year long. I know as well what it's like. I visited all these areas, personally witnessed what it's like to see something you know is wrong and wonder why no one tried to fix it. It's infuriating. The Vice President described it very accurately exactly what you see on the ground. These scoundrels, that's what they are, who rob our federal and state health programs, have decided it is worth the risk. I'm going to make a proposition to you. If you commit crime, on Medicare or Medicaid in America, and you steal, let's say, a couple $1 million, your jail sentence, first-time offender, maybe a year. For a lot of folks, that's a good deal. We have to take these crimes seriously and treat them as seriously as if they were bank robberies, because they're more dangerous than bank robberies. People get hurt during them.
People often get hurt during bank robberies, I've heard. I mean, Heat's an amazing film. I don't think they all turn out that way.
Share some of these horrible stories. The vice president started highlighting autism. Let's get into the details of what's really going on in Minnesota. These are real cases from our group at CMS. These are adjudicated numbers. There's a fraud scheme in Minnesota where criminals, soon to be criminals, pay moms $1,000 roughly in order to enroll their children as being autistic, falsely, dishonestly claiming their children are autistic.
Yeah, we know people have already been arrested. There's already an investigation in place.
Bill Medicaid, this has already happened, millions of dollars for services that were never rendered, never delivered by a qualified staff member. These schemes disproportionately involve immigrant communities. They're insulated, they're able to organize efforts, and sometimes they don't understand what's going on. And it ultimately diverts resources away from kids who truly have autism. Because if every kid in the neighborhood...
Sorry, so the fraudsters abuse the other people, so is that the abuse? That they abuse people in their own communities who can't get food aid some other way, so they create these schemes to get food to them. Now you're making me sympathetic that the fraud was actually a way of getting aid to people that had been cut off from it by the Trump administration in the first term around COVID because they weren't citizens but they were kind of stuck here in this, and their home country was just in as much dire straits as anywhere else. So it's not like they could bug off back home, but they couldn't show up and get the help that American citizens or naturalized citizens or even people who were stuck here while they were visiting and airplanes were shut down. So what do? You set up a Robin Hood fund. It sounds like that's the argument you're making about the Somali community, that there may have been some straight up criminals in there that were the ones sending money back to Al-Shabaab, but there were also people in there that were giving this aid to people who weren't getting aid otherwise.
Autism, then nobody has autism in terms of how you can manage them. There was one...
Sorry, what?
And it ultimately diverts resources away from kids who truly have autism. Because if every kid in the neighborhood has autism, then nobody has autism.
It's brilliant. So it's like, I feel like I'm watching The Incredibles.
Of how you can manage them. There was one behavioral, and by the way, these kids, they carry that diagnosis of autism the rest of their lives.
No, they really don't. Like, what the fuck and by the way, this was autism spectrum disorder. And by the way, what do you think, they're not going to get a real job that they're qualified for because they got a diagnosis of autism when they were fucking 8? Get the fuck out of here.
Mom made a bad decision. The kid pays.
Dude, they got bigger fish to fry. It's harder for them to get a job because they're Somali in Minnesota than it is for them to get a job because they have fucking autism. Jesus Christ. Believe me, racism trumps ableism in a lot of these places.
For the rest of their life. There's one behavioral health organization, Mr. Vice President, in Minnesota. They received $11.5 million in Medicaid payments, but the top biller submitted 450 days where they claimed they were working more than 24 hours a day. I mean, even in the White House, that's tough. It's hard to work more than 24 hours a day. How it didn't get picked up is shocking to us at CMS. There are other red flags in Minnesota, including hundreds of beds.
Well, I think the organization might have been, they billed as the organization running 24 hours a day. That doesn't mean that they were awake nonstop. And the hourly part of it, let's say you get, I don't know, $8, $12 an hour, and then you get a certain amount for working past that as overtime, and you're billing based on that idea because your workers get regular pay and then overtime to keep going because there's a backup order for stuff like that. Then what the billing for the day, if they worked 4 hours past the normal workday, would pan out approximately to be 24 hours of hourly pay for that amount of money. Fuck, these people are stupid.
Beneficiaries receiving treatment linked to one location, which was impossible physically to be true. We had 8 beneficiaries in one of these substance use disorder centers, 8 who were already dead, but the center was still billing us.
Yeah, that's standard fraud. We've seen that before. That's not new. It's certainly not new to the Somali community. It's not new to immigrants at all. I mean, Jesus Christ, check the villages.
Not only did they let the person pass, they kept billing for it. That's the level of average we're talking about. So CMS is done paying.
Also, what do you mean let them pass?
We don't think jail sentences are the right way out. These criminals flee the country. Many are foreign nationals. Instead, we're launching the largest action against fraud that we've ever taken. The money's not going to ever leave the building again. We're going to start draining the swamp of
Dreaming it.
crooks that have inhabited it and are defrauding us. There are 3 bold actions. The first, and for many of you maybe the most important, is we're going to, for the first time, take a massive action to defer funds to a state. Let's start with this Medicaid program in Minnesota, which serves pregnant women. Medicaid takes care of our children. 53% of kids are born in the...
Oh my fucking God. He's going to start socialism. Like, this is so funny. This is so, okay. One of the reasons why what Republicans have always worked on is that their fear of socialism or communism is that the state will not provide a center where this care is done or whatever. That's communism. We'll give funds out and you can pick where to get your health. If you're going to get, it's like a block grant concept. And this asshole is going to, like, we're going to do something, like, there's just no way they don't get to this. The only way we can protect that funds are going to people who are using state funds is if they come to an actual state place. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is socialism. That's what that is. That is definitely it. So, and by the way, knock yourself out, dumbass.
The poverty, they're supported through Medicaid. Disadvantaged seniors, individual with disabilities. It's imponderable that you would take advantage of these precious programs, yet they're putting it at risk, all of it, by stealing the money. So it's our duty to preserve Medicaid, and what we're going to do is identify the scammers, which we have done in Minnesota. We've identified that they've hijacked, in particular, a certain part of the Minnesota Medicaid system.
Also, then, in this, for the DOJ, again, they're too busy redacting Trump's name out of the Epstein files.
Differently, and I'll just put the numbers out there, it's going to be $259 million of deferred payments for Medicaid to Minnesota, which we're announcing as I speak to Governor Walz and his team. And that's based on an audit of the last 3 months of 2025. Restated, $250 million is not going to be paid this month to Minnesota for its Medicaid claims. Now that's $250 million of money. That's your money. It's your taxpayer money.
It's theirs too. It's everybody's. It's pooled together. How about this? How about we start with the states that pay the least into it, and check for fraud there, where the recipients outweigh the tax output of the area. And then we'll work our way to Minnesota after we're done with Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee,
and these home and
Alabama.
Services, which again are services that are typically things you would do for your family, but for whatever reason your family is not there to provide them, are very hard to audit. And for that reason, there's been a lot of slippage. The guardrails have not been well maintained, and if you're not serious about the integrity of the program, you'll see these problems happening in your state, which is why Minnesota's not alone, although they're the first to receive this action. These high-growth areas of fraud are difficult to police, so we require the states to take these issues seriously. This $250 million deferment is hopefully going to get on the radar screen for the state of Minnesota and make sure they are responsive to our requests.
Yeah, well, so basically, the idea is that anybody who's on Medicaid in the state, you're holding those people hostage because of your assumptive level of fraud in the rest of the state. So because somebody committed fraud and is currently being, investigated or charged for it, the person who genuinely needs Medicaid is now on the hook for that. This is why you don't put Republicans in charge of anything important.
Did what any honest and patient-focused agency would do. We have notified the state and that we will give them the money, but we're going to hold it and only release it after they propose and act on a comprehensive corrective action plan to solve the problem. If Minnesota fails to clean up the systems, the state will rack up $1 billion of deferred payments this year. Governor Walz has 60 days, sir, to respond to our letter. And if providers and beneficiaries are worried about getting...
Yeah, they will, with a lawsuit.
...money and services, please call your governor. These are services the governor has already paid for. We are just not reimbursing the state. And to make it clear, there is a rainy day fund in Minnesota, so we are very confident that people will not be hurt in Minnesota.
Which is, again, this is a PR stunt.
This is not a problem with the people of Minnesota. It's a problem with the leadership of Minnesota and other states who do not take Medicaid preservation
Yeah, I'm not holding this person hostage because of something they did. I'm holding this person hostage because of what you did. It's up to you whether I shoot this person. They're not involved in the fraud. But because this is my only way of getting your attention. So you're the one making me pull this trigger. That's what this is. It's a great look. It's like from a from a marketing side, it's very attractive, very sexy, very smart.
Any delay in services is going to be should be laid at the seat of Governor Walz. I believe he will take
Feet, I think, or perhaps at the seat, late at the seat of. All right. Um, Also, again, I'm not shooting this hostage. You're making me shoot this hostage. That's what he's saying. Good Lord. Talk about abusive. Yeah.
They're not the only state that's floundering. We have more announcements from other states coming soon.
Yeah, one of them isn't Ohio, where Les Wexner lives, but the fraud is higher, right? Or Indiana, for example, another state Trump likes, higher amounts of fraud. Weird.
Second big issue has to do with Medicare. So that was Medicaid in Minnesota, takes care of our most vulnerable populations. Medicare takes care of our seniors. Durable medical equipment. Most of you have not thought much about this category. These are the folks who they serve wheelchairs, canes, they sell knee braces, catheters, Foley catheters. Durable medical equipment suppliers, because they ship prostheses and these items, they're a great target for fraudsters. Here's what they do. They can steal the beneficiary number, and they never ship the product. They pretend to ship the product, but nothing ever gets sent out. So there's no cost of goods sold, there's no inventory, there's no payroll, no one works in the place, it's empty. But they generate millions of dollars of fake bills. There was a national DME fraud scheme that generated $1.1 billion recently in fraudulent orthotic brace orders. The beneficiaries whose numbers were stolen and used, they couldn't get those products. Imagine if you're on an insulin pump and someone steals your number and orders an insulin pump fictitiously, bills Medicaid, Medicare, and then you come and want to get this to deal with your diabetes. You don't get it. That actually happened. And what happens to those patients? They don't know if their blood sugar's so high or so low that they might die. That's the risks that we're allowing by not taking this seriously. So today, issue number 2 is we're announcing a 6-month national moratorium.
Okay. The 1.17 billion is over 49 defendants. 324 defendants have been charged for over 14.6. This was in June of last year. By the way, from an ongoing investigation that they've been gathering evidence for, I think, 2 years, which always happens. Okay, wound care fraud, separate 1.1 billion scheme involved fraudulent claims for improper or unnecessary amniotic wound allografts. Transnational one operation involving international criminal organizations submitted over $10 billion in fraudulent claims to Medicare using stolen identities of 1 million Americans. Okay, that is not immigrants in the country. That is people outside the country. Operation Brace Yourself. Okay, 2019 to 2022. And this is, again, notice how he's taking credit for this stuff? 2019 to 2022, ongoing thing. In 2022, the DOJ charged 36 defendants in 13 federal districts. I don't remember who was president in 2022. You'll have to remind me. Districts over 1.2 billion in losses related to fraudulent telemedicine, genetic testing, and DME. Durable medical equipment. That's what he's talking about right there. That's what DME stands for. The scheme: international call centers provided Medicare beneficiaries to accept free orthopedic braces, knee, back, shoulder, wrist, whether they need them or not. This is when they call your grandmother and ask her for her social security number and all that kind of shit, and then they bill on her behalf and all this stuff. Telemedicine companies were paid illegal bribes to write unnecessary orders, which then sold to DME companies to bill Medicare. Result: dozens of individuals, including executives and medical professionals, were charged, and many have pled guilty. Let's see, doesn't charge in massive, let's see, yeah, 2019, 2025. This is the previous time. Yeah, here you go. The owners of dozens of durable medical equipment companies, along with executives at 5 telemedicine companies, this is pre-COVID, by the way, and 3 licensed medical professionals have been charged in what's been called one of the largest healthcare fraud schemes in the United States. Defendants allegedly participated in healthcare fraud schemes involving $1.2 billion in loss. FBI, do they have a time scheme on this? In which case were prosecuted. Indictments were unsealed in several jurisdictions, including South Carolina, New Jersey, and Florida. South Carolina, New Jersey, and Florida. Okay. They outlined an alleged scheme in which the DME companies paid illegal kickbacks and bribes in exchange for referring Medicare beneficiaries by medical professionals working with fraudulent telemedicine companies for back, shoulder, wrist, knee braces, blah, blah, blah. These defendants, who ranged from corporate executives to medical professionals, allegedly participated in an expansive and sophisticated fraud to exploit telemedicine technology meant for patients otherwise unable to access healthcare. Said Assistant Attorney General Benkowski in the news released by the DOJ. The Department of Justice will not tolerate medical blah, blah, blah. Okay. First international call center advertising Medicare benefits, urging them to accept. Okay, this is how the fraud worked. HHS issued a fraud warning, urging consumers to be wary of this scheme and act if they've reported it, because they'd call and try to trick you into giving you their information. Tom Ryan, President and CEO of AA Home Care. Today's action against individuals involved in schemes to defraud patients and taxpayers is welcome news to the AA Home Care and the home medical equipment community. We appreciate the effective work by federal law enforcement agencies and the Department of Health and Human Services to identify and prosecute those 24 individuals associated with DME companies, lead generation services, and physician practices who are taking advantage of the Medicare reimbursement system. Cases brought as part of the Medicare Fraud Strike Force, which maintains 14 strike forces operating in 23 districts. Since its inception in March of 2007, the force has charged nearly 4,000 defendants who have collectively billed the Medicare program for $14 billion. So this has been ongoing. This is, again, if you have a system like this shit is going to happen. You're going to need constant gardening. What they're coming in is acting like this is brand fucking new.
A national moratorium blocking all new enrollments for durable medical equipment, prostheses, orthotics, supplies across the board. These crimes are becoming a major source of
what?
So today, issue number 2 is we're announcing a 6-month national moratorium, blocking all new enrollments for durable medical equipment, prostheses, orthotics, supplies across the board. These crimes are becoming a major source of fraudulent activity. And
so because there's been fraud in the past, you can't start a new company, perhaps even to replace the fake company that got taken down. So you want to do this. You want to start a business. So the next 6 months, you're fucked. If you just got your funding to try and do this or whatever, you can't get a license for durable medical equipment anywhere in the United States federally because of fraud. That's a regular part of dealing with this shit. In every business, there's bad actors and all this kind of stuff. If there was a big retail scam, suddenly you can't open your own retail store because some shit that went down at Target. Fucking hell.
Mr. Vice President, South Florida, do you ever go to McDonald's?
Jesus Christ.
Fraudulent activity. And I'll just mention, Mr. Vice President, South Florida, do you ever go to McDonald's?
Yeah. Too much.
We had rehearsed this. So there are twice as many durable medical equipment suppliers in South Florida than McDonald's.
Wow.
Yeah, because old people don't eat as much fast food, for one. It's a fucking, it's a seafood state on a lot of fronts. And it's full of fucking retirees. Why is that weird?
And that's not because Secretary Kennedy is closing down McDonald's. That's because the amount of fraud is so massive that it's easier to open one of these suppliers than open a bank account, which is why we're working with Secretary Bessent. And part of the reason for this...
Yeah, because Florida is sketchy as fuck.
...is it gives us time to be able to deal with these issues that have become massive. And if we just shut down South Florida, they'd all flee to California and to Texas.
Why? Why wouldn't they go to Arkansas? Why wouldn't they go to Tennessee? Why wouldn't they go to South Carolina or New Jersey where these other fraudsters were? Why the fuck do they have to go anywhere? If you're not supplying anything, why not just have a fucking post office box in Montana?
Have to shut the whole country down. This unfortunate necessity.
Yeah, I just said we practiced this already. Exactly. Because it's...
Yeah,
exactly. Ask Rick Scott. Jesus Christ.
To get on top of what we believe is billions of dollars of DME frauds. We've already stopped $1.5 billion of billing, but we need more time to shut down these bad guys. But it's going to be effective, and it's not going to touch the people who need these services. We have designed this system so that all the people who are already selling products can continue to sell products until we check them out, but no new DME enrollments, no ownership changes, all the things that fraudsters have done historically.
Yeah, Rick Scott, for those that don't know. His company pled guilty to $1.7 billion in fraud. I think it was it was Medicare fraud.
Will be blocked. This way we're preserving access, or not allowing tax dollars to be stolen. Now you may be asking, why is it so important to crush for fraud to assure the affordability of our nation?
No, no one is asking that. Fraud is a natural part of law enforcement. As a matter of fact, we have special fucking jails for it, asshole. We have jails for nonviolent criminals that have a major impact. And you know who you put there? Ghislaine fucking Maxwell. We have these club feds where these assholes have to sit because they didn't murder anybody, they didn't strangle anybody. They're guilty of a white collar crime or pink collar crime, but they didn't break a fucking window and shoot somebody. Their actions could have killed more people than, say, your average bank robber. But still, we put them in a minimum security prison with special effects because the idea is that they can be rehabbed and put back into society easier than other people. I would question that. I would say that, quite frankly, to his point about $1 million versus a year in jail, that's actually a fairly good trade-off. If you could work for a year and get $1 million out of it, if they can't recover the money, if you've hidden it well enough, and you just go, I'm guilty, I don't know where the money's gone. I snorted it. I spent it on hookers and blow, it's gone. And they go, okay, well, shit. And they just eat the loss, throw you in jail for a year, and then you get out and go to the fucking safety deposit box, you put it in. You made $1 million tax fucking free. And during your time at Club Fed, you had 3 hots and a cot. You didn't pay any rent. You didn't pay any taxes. You had your health care taken care of. Fuck. There's almost a reasoning to commit Medicare fraud of $1 billion, like $1 million, $2 million. Hide the money away some way that they can't get access to it. Let them bust you if you have fucking an illness, literally. Just do it because you don't. This is a better version of Breaking Bad. This motherfucker, he could have literally done this, made this money by billing Medicare, stole $4 million from the taxpayer, have him thrown in jail, and they would have treated his cancer in fucking jail. And he wouldn't have had to fucking murder Jesse's fucking girlfriend by looking the other way when she died choking on her own vomit, which is why he sucks and the show's terrible. Anyways.
I'll just give you one example that we just finished dealing with. The Vice President's aware of this. We had skin substitutes that were generating, we believe this coming year, $23 billion in billing. Because we're able to shut that down to where it's supposed to be, because they have a role when used appropriately, every single senior in America, everyone, is going to get $132 extra money this year, just from that one thing that we shut down. That's the amount of money we're talking.
Sorry, what? You're writing a check to old people for $132? What the fuck are you talking about? Spoiler alert. It's early in the season. It's why he's a dick from the start. Fuck Walter White and his bullshit. You need to make this a screenplay. It's not a bad idea. I'm making that right now. I'm gonna. It's a modern day Robin Hood story with medical difficulties, and whether or not it's worth it. And then when the dude gets out of jail, he's like it's like the Shawshank Redemption, except it's surgery instead of a tube full of shit.
Bad, and it affects all of us. And to that note, because every one of you are affected, we want all of you to help us. So the third big announcement is we want to crush fraud by crowdsourcing ideas. We're issuing.
Sign me up, coach. I'm in. What do you need?
Request for information. We need and we want your help. The Vice President, myself, the President.
Is there a reward?
All of us know that all of us are smarter than any one of us. So what can you do? We want your input on how to prevent, detect, and respond to fraud in government-funded.
Sorry, motherfucker. The new fraud czar wants me to do his goddamn job for him? I've got a great suggestion. Have the guy who just got assigned the job do it. Actually, do it. You do it, you dumb motherfucker. Use the American. You want to not waste American tax dollars? Use those tax dollars for the doing of the job, not the performing of the job. Take that kid who's working the fucking camera in the back of the room and have somebody set it up and forget it because they're already filming this shit. get video, like have a White House videographer who just does all of it instead of a department specific one, and then rent the room like a fucking boardroom at WeWork so that nobody's overlapping, film the whole fucking thing and video it and save it and save everybody a bunch of fucking money. And then instead of talking about it, do the fucking thing.
Whatever ideas you have, we're interested in. Our goal.
I get great ones. Chat room, are those good ideas? I would like to say what I just presented. You want to save the taxpayer money? Do your fucking job. Don't talk about your job. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Do it. Land the fucking plane and, figure out how you're going to land the plane and then tell me about it. Everybody in this, they're fucking, it's all these TV dickheads. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm from that neighborhood, in this government that are more interested in telling the story than being in it. Jesus.
Supercharged program integrity over the next 6 months. So we put in a request. That means providers and suppliers and payers and technology companies, patient advocates, beneficiaries. If you see fraud, you let us know. A state Medicaid director can show us patterns of fraud that we're not aware of. A provider can help understand compliance burdens and how to deal with those more effectively. Patient advocates get cracking on making sure that people are aware of fraud. And like we have done already this year by pulling in those kinds of ideas, we've stopped almost $6 billion from leaving the building. But that leaves a lot more out there that we can take advantage of. So over the next 60.
Also, by the way, he's including funds they're cutting off to real Medicaid recipients in Minnesota in that.
The Crush Initiative, which just issued, is us asking you to help.
Sorry, this is called the Crush Initiative? Dude, we're all fucking crush it, bro. Bro, we're fucking crushing it. What an asshole.
Almost $6 billion from leaving the building, but that leaves a lot more out there that we can take advantage of. So over the next 60 days, the Crush Initiative, which just.
The Crush Fraud Initiative. You're not just, you're not naming it after the fucking turtle in Finding Nemo, asshole.
Is us asking you to help us build something better, to help the brave patriots out there who want to play a role to play a role. Call 1-800-HHS-TIPS if you see.
Jesus Christ. Do our job for us. How the fuck? Yeah, if you're committed, that's right. Kilkenny. Kilkenny, if you're committing fraud, please turn yourself in. Make our jobs easier. Self-deport yourself from being a fraudster.
Fraud. Or just go to cms.gov/fraud. Those are simple, easy ways for you to help us address the problems the Vice President highlighted. God bless you all, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. Great job.
Great job. Going to shake your hand right there. Now, about South Florida being a dung heap.
Very, very important initiative, and we'll take a.
Okay, real quick. If all of these big busts are coming out of South Florida, why aren't you shit-talking Florida the way you shit-talk Minnesota? Because it's been an ongoing problem there for, it seems like, decades. And the problem with some of the billing nationwide comes from South Florida. It's not localized to the funds going to fucking Minnesota the way the Somali fraud allegedly is.
I didn't expect you to put me on the spot with Bobby Kennedy about my fast food habits, but here we are.
That's me being charming. I eat human. I often will eat human so that they think that I do thing like human people doing.
Sir in the front.
Sir in the front.
Two things, Mr. Vice President. First, can you talk about the legal authority under which the federal government pauses legally obligated funds under mandatory funding from Congress, such as Medicaid? And secondly, if you could tell us anything you know about the situation off the coast of Cuba, where there's a speedboat shot. We've been briefed on that. You know, if Americans were killed or injured in it.
Yeah, so on the second thing, Mark.
Actually, I don't know shit about that.
Briefed me about 15 minutes ago on it, but we don't know a whole lot of details, and so I'll defer to the White House to provide more updates as well.
You're part of the White House, dung heap. What you mean is the State Department, motherfucker.
Certainly, a situation that we're.
You're the Vice President. Jesus Christ. This asshole thinks he's like. I'm at CMS today. I represent CMS now, so.
Hopefully, it's not as bad as we fear it could be, but can't say more because I just don't know more.
Then how do you know what defines bad? And hold it real quick. Let's see. Let me show you what he's talking about. Yeah, here it is. Cuba shot people in a speedboat from America, is the theory. So this is 4 shot dead on U.S. Registered speedboat. And again, U.S. registered is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. 4 people who entered Cuban waters on a U.S. registered speedboat have been shot dead by border guards, Cuban government said. There was also, I believe, a shootout. 6 additional passengers were wounded in the incident, which took place near an island on Cuba's northern coast. Maybe it was just somebody coming from Little St. James burying some shit. 4 people who entered Cuban waters on a U.S. registered speedboat have been shot dead by border guards. 6 additional passengers were wounded in the incident. U.S. Secretary of State said the nationalities of those on board is unclear. Again, and that the U.S. will make determination based on facts. Right now, we're still gathering facts. Okay. He said the boat was not carrying U.S. government personnel. Cuba's government said it did not know the identities of those on board the vessel. Well, then how do you know who the fucking wounded are? Nor what it was doing in the area, and that an investigation has been launched to clarify the event. Look, I get it if everybody died and the boat was fucking destroyed, but obviously there are 6 living people. Who the fuck are they? Set with the registered Florida registered vessel, shocker, was detected near Cayo Falcones, in the country's central Villa Clara province on Wednesday morning when a Cuban boat carrying 5 members of the ministry's border guard approached the vessel. The crew of the violating speedboat opened fire and wounded the Cuban commander, the statement said. As a consequence of the confrontation, as of this time, reported 4 aggressors on the foreign vessel were killed and 6 injured. Those injured were evacuated and given medical assistance. But you don't know who the fuck they are? Rubio spoke from St. Kitts and Nevis, where he had a travel trip to meet Caribbean leaders to talk about how to get to hidden stuff on the island and make sure there are no, chips in the video cameras there, like they were at the Guthrie, house that could be, reverse engineered to pull footage. Amid the Trump administration push to ramp up pressure on Cuba's government, it's highly unusual to see shootouts on the open sea like that. It's not something that happens every day. Yeah, no shit. That's why it's news. We're going to find out exactly what happened, who was involved, and we'll make a determination on the basis of what we find out. U.S. Coast Guard has traveled to the vicinity of the attack. I don't know who has possession of the vessel. This is the first thing we have. Yeah. I mean, there is something, if you were just briefed about it, you can know that there are 4 dead, 6 wounded. We don't know the nationality of the people. The boat itself was registered in Florida, but we don't know if they actually owned it or if if there was, they were any or all Americans on there. They certainly weren't government personnel and they weren't military. And that's what you say in that situation. Like we'd send spies into Cuba on a fucking speedboat. You know what? In this administration, we might be doing stupid shit like that. Who can fucking say?
On the question of the legal authorities, I mean, inherent in Congress's assigning of the administration, actually, we're the ones who spend this money. Congress appropriates it. We're the ones who actually make sure this goes to the people it ought to go to. And inherent in that is making sure that it only goes to the people that Congress says that it should go to.
Yeah, but that's the DOJ to do that. If it's allocated toward the state, the governor is the authority on the reception of those funds, not somebody, whether you don't like the state or because the guy was the running mate of your last opponent.
We shouldn't be sending money to fraudsters. We should not be sending money to companies that are committing mass fraud. We shouldn't be sending money to anybody that's...
So we're cutting off funds to Florida as well? Because it sounds like they're the literal beating heart of this fraud scheme.
Defraud the American taxpayer. So I know, Oz and his team, he's got the best team, I think, in healthcare anywhere in the private or the public sector. It's one of
yeah, that's just fucking stupid.
The things I love about working with Dr. Oz is he's brought great people along with him, and congratulations on this. But I feel quite confident we have the legal authority to do this. And again, I'd reiterate, we don't want to do this.
But Trump is making me.
We don't want to be in a situation where the state of Minnesota is being so careless with federal tax dollars that we have to turn the screws on them a little bit so that they take this fraud seriously. You heard Dr. Oz say this. Tim Walz could call him, could call me, could call anybody in the administration, and we've given him
They already spoke.
days to respond to this.
There's already there's legal precedent that the fraud is being looked into. There's full investigations. The state isn't, unlike in the shooting of in Minnesota itself. The state authorities are cooperating fully with the federal authorities about this fraud in the Medicare and Medicaid funds and the autism funds. So the same cannot be said about the murder of Alex Preddy.
All we need the governor and the administration in Minnesota to do is something quite simple, which is to show that before you give Medicaid funds to somebody, you're taking seriously whether they provided the services that they say that they're providing. And the fact that there are so many people handing out millions and billions of dollars
in Florida,
federal Medicaid money, without even confirming that they're doing the thing that they say that they're doing, it's a disgrace. It's a defrauding of the American taxpayer, and we're stopping it. Caitlin.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Two questions. One, on the 60 days that Governor Walz has to respond, what exactly is the condition that he needs to meet for this funding to be released back to his state? I just wasn't really clear on that. And
nobody is.
on Iran,
He's got to prove to us that he's serious, and he's got to kiss Trump's ass or something.
here, can you explain to the American people why the United States would need to strike Iran to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon if the United States obliterated their enrichment program last summer?
Well, I'm not going to make any news on Iran.
Because that's an oxymoron. Thank you, Caitlin. And I can understand why you're not smiling about these questions.
Today, Caitlin, I'll let the president make those announcements. As you know, he is sending two of his best negotiators to Geneva tomorrow in order to continue to try to strike the best deal possible for the American people. But the principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem. As the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically, but of course the president has other options as well. On what we need to see from Governor Walz, I'll say something about that briefly and then turn it over to Dr. Oz. Look, it's actually pretty simple. What we want to see from the governor of Minnesota, from the entire administration there in Minnesota, is some affirmative steps to make sure that the people who are billing us for Medicaid services are actually providing those Medicaid services. The main source of
Then send in patient advocates to make sure people are getting the care. Maybe that's the way of doing it. Sorry, that actually gives a shit about patients. I'm sorry, you're just doing this to shame state governments of blue states that have more, higher tax bases and more expenditures than red states.
Whether it's a small business or a bigger company, is you
What a
have
fucking
people
goon.
who are billing the government millions, tens of millions, billions of dollars saying that they're providing a service, but there's no actual confirmation. There's no follow-up to ensure that they're actually providing those services. We want to see that follow-up from Minnesota. Dr. Oz, maybe you can speak to a little bit more about how exactly we want to see that.
Let me combine both these questions. So on December the 7th, we sent a letter to Governor Walz asking for a corrective action plan, which is a mechanism for us to extract from the state what they think they can do to fix the problems. The answer we got back at the end of the month, which is what the deadline was inadequate. We alerted them to this. We issued guidance that we were going to defer income based on an audit of last quarter's money. So we actually went dutifully through all of the bills that were sent to us. We found that of these high-risk services, roughly half of them, you really couldn't trust the data we were looking at. It's not that the numbers don't add up. The backup to the numbers is not there. So what do we need to have happen? We need to know that the providers actually are the real providers. Oftentimes, there's no person that you can associate with the treatment itself.
By the way, by and large, what he's talking about are things that are happening in South Florida, not Minnesota.
After you adjudicate who these providers are, make sure they're not already in trouble for doing bad stuff, and then evaluate all the current providers to make sure they're supposed to be able to provide these services. And there's a whole slew of tools that we can use, including
Supposed to be able? You mean actually able?
before you pay the bill, that the bill is legitimate. That prepayment review is incredibly important. It's cumbersome. It's clunky. We wish we didn't have to do it. But I'm going to highlight something that the Vice President mentioned. These are services that we normally would not pay for. They're services we give to you because your family can't do them for you.
What the fuck does that mean? That's like entirely the process of government. Like what if providing for the general welfare is in the fucking Constitution, and the general welfare means helping people when they are affected by extraordinary circumstances of outside of their control, namely disease and environmental, especially. If that's part of it, what do you mean it's not something you would normally provide?
A hernia operation, there's a dozen people who have credentials, licensing, we can use a scar. But if your service is transporting you to the doctor's office and you can't tell me who actually drove the car and why they billed so much, and did the patient even go to the doctor's office, then we have to do our job, which you would want us to do, which is to ask for some backup, and there wasn't any backup. So to echo 60 days, that's the deadline. We expect to hear back. We've been following the rules meticulously to do this correctly, which is one of the reasons we're optimistic will be effective in Minnesota.
Okay, by the way, can I explain something, what they're arguing for right now? May I? May I actually to all the maggots in the room? What Dr. Oz is talking about here is the need for more regulations. That in a circumstance where a lot of money is doled out, you need regulations to make sure you're getting what you pay for, and no more and no less, and that you are clearly defining what that will pay for and what it will not. That's what a regulation is. And in Donald Trump killing regulations willy fucking nilly, it's not surprising, especially during COVID, when he was just basically saying, fuck it, we got to save the stock market, that there was a shit ton of financial fraud born out of that period, because he was so worried about goosing the economy more than saving the lives of the American people, that it just opened the floodgates for anybody who wanted to, or the barn doors, I guess, for anybody who wanted to try and do this kind of fraud. You need regulations. You need proper governance. This is why we have fucking oversight and committees. And this is why the committees, when they look into this oversight, it should be doing this instead of crawling up Hunter Biden's ass for fucking 3 years and getting nothing. You don't think James Comer's committee couldn't have found their way to some Medicare or Medicaid fraud or insurance fraud or crypto fraud over the process of the time they were chasing down the $2 million in unpaid taxes that the IRS was already after Hunter Biden for owing? This is why you have regulations. And what they are arguing for now is another form of of a deeper level of regulation. They just want, and arguably it's regulations for friends, for foes, but not for friends.
Great.
Mr. Vice President, I'm just wondering about this huge universe of fraud that you're talking about, $300 billion. How did you arrive at that number? What number is realizable in terms of savings? And you've mentioned California, you've said that you're going to move on to other states. Can you just give us a kind of snapshot of where you see that? And
wow, actual questions. I think we all owe the mainstream media an apology for this woman doing her job. If only journalists would do their job. Now, obviously, it's the follow-up that a lot of people have a problem with, but these are rock-solid questions.
For all of the states that you're going after and where you see these problems ruled by Democratic, California and Minnesota are both Democratic-run states, so just a little bit of a preview.
Well, you said ruled by Democrats. We didn't use that word. You did. But here's what I'd say. $300 billion in the grand scheme of how much the federal government spends on healthcare services, it sounds like a ton of money. It's actually, the federal government spends well over $1 trillion in providing medical services to the American people. And based on what we've seen, based on the amount of services that we've seen that have been billed that are fraudulent, and also based on the fact that in a number of blue states, and this is true as far...
Hey, asshole, well over $1 trillion is not $2 trillion. It's not even over $1.5 trillion. So we're talking about 1 to 1.4. Let's just go there. Of that, especially if it's $1 trillion, closer to that number, 300 billion is a practical third of that. So yeah, it's a big fucking number. You're talking about cutting medical expenditure to the American people by a third because you're convinced that a third of the things that Americans get help from the federal government for are fraudulent. A fucking third.
No, only in blue states where you have illegal aliens encouraged to get on the Medicaid program. We actually think $300 billion may be conservative. And we certainly, our ambition here is to get as much of that money back for the American taxpayer as possible. Again, we're taking the social safety net. We're taking something that exists.
Okay, it's a made up fucking number. It's fucking made up. There is no standard. And if there is one, he doesn't know it. Oz might have a more detailed answer because he's actually in the job at this time, but Vance doesn't fucking know. He knows it sounds big.
Benefit of people who can't pay for medicine on their own. We want to help our fellow Americans. We can't do that if those programs are being defrauded by people who either shouldn't be here in the first place or have the legal right to be here but are committing criminal acts by defrauding these systems.
A bunch of the people who are committing the fraud aren't even in America while they're doing it. They were defrauding using telemedicine.
Clarify one number.
Go ahead, please.
Just on the numbers, the $300 billion is from the Kaiser Family Foundation assessment of estimated 5% fraud in all healthcare, not just federally funded healthcare.
All right, 5%. Then it's all right. 300 billion across everybody: insurance companies, federal, veterans benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever. Okay, hold on. Kaiser Foundation, 300 billion fraud. No, sorry. No. Let's see. Sorry, you know what? It's funny. When I looked up Kaiser Foundation, $300 billion fraud, you know what came up? Kaiser Permanente affiliates pay $556 million to resolve False Claims Act allegations in January of 2026. Let's see. $1 million fraud estimate. Yep. No, I don't see that. Yeah, Kaiser Permanente defrauded Medicare of $1 billion, according to the DOJ. There's another $400 million opportunity for Kaiser in 2006 alone. Affiliates pay $556. Yeah. Sorry. So 300 billion is across
these systems.
Can I clarify one number?
Go ahead, please.
Just on the numbers, the 300 billion is from the Kaiser Family Foundation assessment.
Sorry, Kaiser Family Foundation. Beg your pardon. Everybody else, you could probably get data mining company fabricated medical things 2021. At least 2 dozen whistleblower cases, some dating to 2009, have alleged fraud by Medicare Advantage plans. Yeah, I don't know where he's getting that. And quite frankly, every time I look for it, I get stories about Kaiser Permanente doing, at this count, like $2.2 billion in fraud themselves.
Of estimated 5% fraud in all healthcare, not just federally funded healthcare. So it's 5% of the total, roughly $6 trillion. We spend almost close to $2 trillion, $1.8 trillion of federal monies. So the federal portion would be about $100 billion. And we believe much of that would be achievable. It's not fraud.
Okay, so $100 billion of fraud out of 1.7. And it's waste, fraud, and abuse. It's not all fraud. It's not $100 million of fraud. And so $100 billion of that. So we're going to shave some of that off. So we're talking about $100 billion. He's trying to go after $100 billion, what they assume is fraud, I guess, yearly in a $1.7 trillion system. Okay.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
Right. Yeah. So we're not saying it's all fraud. Some of it is our fuck up. Some of the waste is because of assholes. Dr. Oz I mean, when you got to justify a number like that, it makes sense that you'd hire a bunch of fuck ups because you've got to look how much waste there is. He's in charge of it.
Sorry.
Yep. No, man.
So again, the number is 100 billion. of the 1.7 trillion. And I told you Vance doesn't know this fucking number. And again, this is an estimate based on the Kaiser Family Foundation, tied to obviously Kaiser Permanente, the hospital system, which was defrauding Medicare to the tune of about $2 billion.
Yeah, you can go first and then you.
So that the fraudsters, when busted, are assuming like everybody's doing it. It's not just me.
Thank you very much, Vice President. As you know, the Kurds have been loyal allies to the United States for decades. You're fighting dictatorship in Iraq, we're fighting terrorism in the region, and recently President Masoud Barzani worked closely with the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria to help find a peaceful solution to the conflict there. How do you see the future of the strategic relationship?
Yeah, he doesn't know anything about this, dude. I understand you're talking to the vice president, but yeah, you're going to come up dry. Yeah.
Between the Kurdistan and the United States of America?
Well, look, let me be brief here because we're here to focus on the fact that way too many people are defrauding the American population.
Still citation needed.
You know, we have a great
I
relationship.
guess if any is too many, then sure.
With the Kurds. The president loves the Kurds. I know that the entire administration.
Yeah, we could tell by how he left them high and dry during the last term.
We've had great contacts and great friendships with the people, the Kurdish people in various countries all over the world.
Yeah, not in the area that they would like to become Kurdistan, obviously.
Our attitude is we want those people to be able to live in peace and harmony and prosperity with their neighbors. We've pursued a foreign policy of peace in part because we want the Kurdish people, but also the Arab people who live there, the Jewish people who live there, the Christians. We want everybody to be able to live in peace. And that has been the main focus of our policy in Syria. It's been the main focus of our policy really all over the world. Ma'am? Yeah. No, let's, thank you.
How do you intend to make sure that the consequences of ending these fraud programs in Minnesota don't impact the people who are enrolled in Medicaid? And at a bigger picture, how...
Yeah, how do you claim victimization without victimizing more people?
I think that the polls show that Democrats historically have the advantage on healthcare. Do you think that these efforts on fraud might change that for Republicans?
You know, I'm not really worried about the politics. I'm worried about the justice of it all. I think it's offensive that
Yeah, that's what she's asking you about, shithead.
American taxpayers pay into these programs and they are defrauded.
Yeah, and it's offensive that your focus on fraud would deny people who actually deserve care that care because you have a bone to pick with the fucking governor of the state.
In some ways, more significantly than that, it's really sad.
When there's already an ongoing investigation and people are already going to jail.
That American children who need these
Trump likes cheese curds, right?
services aren't able to get them because it's going to fraudsters instead of somebody else. So here's what I think. I mean, look, we're certainly going to make sure that our anti-fraud efforts go after the fraudsters and not after anybody who actually benefits from these services.
How can you say that when you're just going to cut off all funds to Minnesota unless they acquiesce to your definition of fraud control?
But I actually think the question is a little off in a way, because the problem is not
because you don't have an answer to it?
Going after the fraud. The problem is the fact that these programs are being defrauded to begin with.
No, that's always happened, and it's always going to happen because that's the nature of the constant gardening of governance and law enforcement. The question becomes, do you victimize more people than the people actually causing the fraud in your attempts to go after the fraud? If you're too stupid to understand that, then you shouldn't be anywhere near the power that you have.
They will not exist. Our social safety net will disappear unless we take fraud more seriously. So what I'm most worried about is that unless we preserve these programs for the next generation, they're going to disappear and all the money is going to go to fraudsters. Go ahead.
Yes, Alio, sure.
You're mentioning a lot about justice of it all. So what exactly would that look like? Dr. Oz mentioned that jail sentences aren't necessarily the right way to go, but is there a way of tossing this money back? Ways to get refunds? Do you want predictions on that? And then I have follow-up questions.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are certainly ways to claw some of the money back. It depends on the circumstances of the case. When you're talking about hundreds of...
All right, this is just yammering.